G2G convener for Jito, and MD AR Land Developers Limited. Thank you.
Okay, let's start with big Jai Jinendra. We are honored to have Rajiv Chandrasekhar with us. He's been introduced, and as we said, we've been awaiting your meeting with us for many, many years.
Okay. There is always the right time for a meeting like this, and turns out that this is the right time.
Absolutely. So, what a unique combination. A chief designer from Silicon Valley, a seasoned politician and minister holding two positions. So I think I'm just going to do an interactive session. You completed 2 years on 7th of July as a minister, and it's about 9 years for Digital India. So how has it been the journey, and where do you see the crystal ball going forward?
So, you know, when we were walking in, you were talking about your visit to Washington, D.C., and you had an occasion to be part of a very historic visit by our Prime Minister. And in a lot of ways, that visit of our Prime Minister to the US and the signing of that agreement between the US and India. Remember, US has been for 3 decades the leader in tech. And for the Americans to say that they will work in partnership with India for the four most critical technologies of the future: semiconductor, quantum, high performance computing and AI, tells you how far as a nation we have traveled in the last 9 years. And in 2015, when Narendra Modi ji launched Digital India, it was on a stage like this, and I was in the audience. And I remember looking up, listening to him, and he laid out his vision of Digital India. And he said many things. But one thing he said in the end was that my dream is that India will no longer be just a consumer of technology. We will also be a producer in the coming years. He said that in 2015. And I remember in the audience saying, "Ye to ऐसी है, ऐसे होगा नहीं है." और मैंने ये 2022 में अहमदाबाद में there was a program, Digital India का annual celebration, and Honorable Prime Minister was on the dais, and I had the privilege of speaking, and I looked at him and said, "Sir, 2015 में आपने जब ये बात किया, 2015 में Digital India का जो vision आपका था, मैं भी था audience में, और मैंने कहा ये कभी नहीं होगा, और आपने सबको गलत सिद्ध कर दिया. आपने you have converted every cynic into today a believer in the future of India and the destiny of India because of what we have achieved in the last 9 years." So I can certainly tell you the last 2 years as a minister and the last 9 years as a citizen and an MP, and I have been in tech for 35 years. I'm older than I look. So depending on the audience, I say I'm 35, or I hide that I'm just 35. But in my 35 years of tech, I have never felt more excited about India's place in technology as I feel today. Wow. And I'm not overstating this. I know you say कि ये politician है, इसका तो instinct है ज़्यादा बोलना, लेकिन मैं sincerely कह रहा हूँ कि जो हमारा position है दुनिया के देशों में, and in the technology ecosystem, looking forward, we are at a tremendously exciting time for India and for young Indians.
Wow. I think I'm going to go with the lighter question. So I think we talked about Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So how is it working for a big boss, Modi ji, who works 20 hours a day?
Yeah, no, look, I have had the good fortune in my life to work with some very bright people, very smart people in my life. I've worked with Andy Grove. I've had occasion. I'm one of the few Indians to have interacted with Steve Jobs, Bill Gates. I've had occasion to work with many of these people. Craig McCaw, who was a pioneer in cellular. But I can certainly tell you that Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, and again, I'm clarifying that I'm not saying this because I'm a minister or I'm a BJP MP. He's certainly up there in terms of a person with very sharp strategic clarity about what he wants to do, what he wants our country to achieve. And his clarity helps a lot of us who are much less experienced about politics and much less experience in governance, to get where he wants to take our country, where he wants to take us. So having that kind of clarity, that kind of determination, and you know, I am a workaholic.
Yeah.
All my years I've been a workaholic. But when I see Modi ji, I say, Arey, he is making even workaholics look like normal average people who work. So he is very committed, very determined, and more importantly than those two things, he is extremely clear in his mind about what his goals are. And that is the sign really an astonishingly, unusually, unique leader.
Amazing. And I must say, I travel abroad frequently, and I have never seen, never been felt as proud as an Indian citizen as it's been in the 9 years, because India's image across the world is altogether different ballgame, as Minister just stated. Now, talking about the Indian economy, which is currently somewhere, based on the estimates, about $3+ trillion, and is expected to grow to something like $5+ trillion by 2030. And this question is on behalf of our President Abhijit Srisrimal, who is working on a global economic forum. What would it take to get there? And then what is the role of digital economy of that whole big pie?
No, look, I think it is clear that in terms of global economies today, India is, in a sense, one of the biggest bright spots. If you look at the world and the economies of the world post-COVID, the big so-called big guys, the big guys before COVID, you look at the UK, they are hurting, and they're hurting bad. They are in double-digit inflation. The currency is weak and vulnerable. You look at the US, and you know that the overstimulation during the pandemic has caused them permanent structural problems, and you can see banks failing, and the financial sector has never been more vulnerable. The big country, China, has gone through 5 rounds of lockdown and has not even today recovered in terms of exports and its industry. And today they have a problem of joblessness, the high wages, and they are becoming increasingly an uncompetitive economy because of aging. If you look at all of these trends and then you step back and look at, this India, which people used to say is a poor country, is a developing nation, is suddenly becoming the fastest growing economy in the world, is being looked at as talent hub of the world, is clearly on path to, we were the 12th largest economy in 2014, we are the 5th largest economy today, and very shortly we will be the 3rd largest economy in the world. And in our lifetimes, I did not ever think that in my lifetime I would ever be able to even anticipate that we will be a developed nation. So there is certainly, from a global economic standpoint, there is a redrawing of the global economy, and India is certainly taking a very different space, role, and leadership in the global economy. That's point number one.
Yeah.
On the digital part, I must tell you through sheer statistics, in 2014, the digital or tech component of the GDP was about 4%, 4 to 5%. Today, we are at about 10% of total GDP. Actually, it's a little bit more. By 25-26, in a $5 trillion pie, the digital will be $1 trillion. So 20% of GDP will be a digital economy. So, and as the Honorable Prime Minister said in 2021 when he was on Independence Day, he spoke from the Red Fort. He said he called these next 10 years, he gave it a new brand name. He called it India Techade. A decade of technology opportunities for India, and he called it India Techade. And that is what this $1 trillion is about. Then he went on to say something very interesting and unique, which is of interest to especially JIF, that this $1 trillion economy and the India Techade will be architected, built, created on the energy, determination of young Indians. So in a lot of ways, I don't know, Sanjay, how old you are. Certainly, he did not think I was going to be involved. All the grey-haired people, he did not think. He was really of the view that this India Techade is really going to be about young Indians stepping up looking at all these opportunities that have been created, whether it's space, semiconductors, the Web3, blockchain, AI, consumer tech, whatever, and saying that we will expand the digital economy. And there's an underlying story there which I love sharing with youngsters, which is that India will do in 10 years what China took 30 years to do and failed. China spent $250 billion, for example, on semiconductors, spent 30 years on it and still has failed. And we will do in 10 years what China has spent all this money, spent 30 years on doing and failed. We will do it in 10 years.
Wow. I think one of the favorite topics is semiconductor industry. So I think everything we have, whether it's cars or automotives or anything you have in the house, your mobile phone, it runs all on the chips. And Rajiv Chandrasekhar happened to be a chip designer. He used to work for Intel, and he worked with folks like Andy Groves. So I think the question on the semiconductor industry, which is the drive to a big success for India, it has not been as successful when we look at the NVIDIA, when we look at the Intels, AMDs, Lam Research, Applied Materials, KLA Tenneco, so far and so forth. I know there has been an effort, but the key drive for the semiconductor has not been as would like it to be. And what are your plans?
No, you're absolutely right. I think 75 years of independence, and there are some interesting stories online. If you Google it, there's an interesting article by Statesman newspaper who summarizes how in the last 65 years India lost so many times the opportunity to become a semiconductor nation.
Yes.
And you know, in a lot of ways it also depends on the political leadership of the time.
Absolutely.
If you don't have a strategic view about what our country can do and must do and should do, then you miss buses and you miss trains all along the history of the nation. I'll give you an example before I talk about semiconductor. In 2014, and I use this example, 82 to 86% of all mobile phones consumed in India were imported. Imported,
86%. Yeah.
Today in 2023, we manufacture 99.9999% of all mobile phones consumed in India. In 2014, there was zero Batta Sannata exports. Zero.
Yeah.
And last year we have exported 1 lakh crores of Apple phones and Samsung phones made in India to the world. 1 lakh crores. Now, why in 2014 were we importing so much? For that whole decade, which I refer to as, sorry to introduce some politics here, but I refer to it as a lost decade. We basically allowed Indian electronics industries to be killed off by rampant imports. And there were many, many companies that were doing electronics. There were many companies making mobile phones, there were many companies making TVs. All of them were dispatched off by rampant imports. So in 2014, as India entered 2014, the background of the world was that the second largest traded commodity in the world after hydrocarbon, after energy, which you are in,
I'm in energy.
that is the highest traded commodity. The second largest traded commodity was electronics.
Wow.
The total market for electronics today in the world is $1.6 trillion.
Wow.
And we decided as a country, because of the political leadership of the time, chodo.
Chordo.
2014 se now, we have rebuilt that. Similarly, before 2014, some genius decided, semiconductor, क्यों चाहिए semiconductor? जरूरी नहीं है, वो थोड़ा बहुत खरीदें. As Sundar Pichai said in the White House, I don't know, you were there.
Yeah.
Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, says something amazing in the White House. He said that the world has only woken up to this intensity and the impact of digital technologies today. And the Prime Minister of India saw this in 2015 when he launched Digital India.
Wow.
So, in 2021 December, Prime Minister said, we have now created some scale in electronics. The big thing that is powering electronics is semiconductors. It is time for India to be now a semiconductor nation. He set aside 76,000 crores, gave some of us the responsibility to build this. And in the last 18 months, 34 new startups in semiconductor design, a new curriculum that will create 85,000 VLSI engineers out of the Indian education system, a new India Semiconductor Research Center being built in Mohali, a new packaging unit for the first time in the history of India, Micron, which is a very, very large American company, is setting up a $2.5 billion plant in Gujarat. And eventually, very shortly, you will hear that a fab is also being set up. So, 18 महीने में जो we have made progress as a nation thanks to the vision and the support of our Prime Minister. Many countries are still struggling to get started. And I know one country in the north that spent 30 years trying to do it and still failed.
Amazing. So thank you. I think glad to see the semiconductors growing so well. So let me ask the audience, do you know the first startup unicorn in India? It was none other than, I think, one of the first startups. The person sitting next to me, Rajiv Chandrasekhar.
Yeah.
After his higher education in the US and working in as a chief designer with Intel and others, he came back to India and he did the BPL mobile and successfully exited. So we talk about the unicorns. Currently,
But I want to just add there, but those days it was never called a unicorn. I mean, they just said it's a $1 billion exit and that was it. The word unicorn was just coined in the last 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
So, yeah, so it never, unicorn was a mythological creature. So that phrase never entered into the lexicon till I think maybe 2015, 14, 15, 16, that time frame.
Yeah, so we got an audience with a lot of startups, a lot of eco entrepreneurs. So my question is, I think you're doing it so early, more than almost 20 years ago, something like that. So the key learnings from that, and then we talk about 100,000 startups, 108 unicorns. How do we multiply that? I think we're not happy, or we shouldn't be happy where we are. How to multiply those?
No, I'll tell you what the Prime Minister's targets are. We are today about 1,20,000 startups, and depending on how you do the math, about 110 unicorns or 108 unicorns. The Honorable Prime Minister is very clear. He wants to get to not less than 10, 15, 25 lakh startups. And I'll tell you why this is possible. When we talk about 108 unicorns, why getting to 10,000 unicorns is very possible. Because if you look at 2014 and look at the progress until now, we were, as a nation, we were only in ITES in 2014. The next 5-7 years, and many of the unicorns here in the tech space are all consumer internet, D2C type of plays. But the whole expanse of areas that have opened up since, in deep tech, in AI, in the data economy, in Web3, in semiconductor design, in electronics and microelectronics, high performance computing, there is a huge number of areas where unicorns are just beginning to enter. Prospective unicorns, they are not unicorns yet. So I actually think that what was just, let us say, 1/3 of the overall tech space, where we have seen such success in the last 5 years or 4 years, now the entire area has been opened up, including space. And I want to share this story with those who are in the audience, that in February, March of 2022, Honorable Prime Minister opened up space and said startups can enter space. In May of 2022, I inaugurated the first startup conference for space. Wow. There were 138 companies already who were doing launch vehicles, mission computers, AI, all kinds of other technologies that go into space, space flight and space mission. So the number of areas that are now open that are still yet to be fully tapped by Indian startups are huge. So I certainly think in the short term, we will go from 108 unicorns to close to 10,000. I'm talking about short term as in the next 4 or 5 years. And the number of startups to being at least 10x or what we are today.
Wow. Amazing. 10,000 unicorns, think about it. Currently we are saying 108, right, Rajiv bhai? This is simply beyond anything. And I hear by 2075, I think we might still live around for 2075.
Yeah.
I think India is going to be the second largest economy in the world. So I think I'm going to move to a little bit of a lighter question. If the camera is, if you can close in on the minister, look at him. He's a digital man of India, technology man of India. He's got the Apple phone, Apple Watch, everything high tech. But look at his pocket.
And
he's carrying a
Samsung phone as well. Yeah.
But he's carrying a pencil.
Oh yes, yeah.
So I think I'm a curious enough, and so is the audience. Why you still carry the pencil which we used to carry 30 years ago, 40 years ago? Yes.
No, there's no reason. I mean, I carry a pencil because I like to write down stuff, make notes. And if I keep pens, I tend to lose my pens, and therefore it's more efficient and cheaper to keep the pencil. And I've always done this for as long as I remember, and it's a habit that I've kept, and it's a useful habit.
We're glad to see it. So.
And it's a nice Natraj pencil which I've used for the last 30, 35 years. So it's also made in India. So.
Oh, great. Made in India. Another question is about fostering the growth of innovation, the technology, the startup, the skills development. So as far as, you have another portfolio that is, the skills development. As far as building the bridge of the development for our Indian youth, for the whole generation across, what do you foresee, what policies and framework you have in mind to get us to the scale? I mean, we do very well in Silicon Valley, most Indians. How do we take the India to that level?
So there is usually every conversation on skills, I start by sharing some data, especially with people who are so well informed as you and educated and learned people like you. I don't know how many of you are aware that in 2014, there were 42 crore Indians who were working. There were 42 crore Indians in the workforce. And out of the 42 crore Indians, 31 crore Indians had no skills.
Wow.
Yeah, that's exactly the reaction I get. That means 3 out of every 4 Indians who are working,
75%,
65 years after independence, had no skills. No education, no skills. But they still were working. And in addition, 1.9 crore Indians joined the workforce every year because they dropped out of school, also unskilled. So this was in a sense the legacy. This was in a sense why for many, many years we were not a competitive talent hub.
Yeah.
We had many smart people, but they went off abroad. The Sundar Pichais and the Satya Nadellas of the world, including myself, so I should not just blame them. So this was the kind of situation where education and skills were only available to the elite. And in a lot of ways, a large part of our society was left to fend on their own and survive on their own with whatever instincts, self-learning that they could do. The Prime Minister, when he launched, Narendra Modi ji, when he launched Skill India, his main mission was to reverse this. So he did 2 things which you are aware of. One is the National Education Policy which he launched in 2020. Make sure that 1.9 crore number goes to 0. Because anybody who joins school today, as part of the curriculum from the 6th standard, a student is taught skills. So even if you drop out of school in the 8th standard, my father has no money, my mother has no money, I have to do some work to support my family, you still have a minimum of 2 years of skills with you. If you drop out in the 10th standard, you have 4 years of some skills with you. If you drop out in the 12th standard and you don't do higher education, you can still take your skills, get credits for the skills, work, and then 2 years later take those credits for the skills and go back to the higher education system. This is the deepest and the biggest reform that nobody has really talked about enough, especially amongst people such as yourself who are businessmen, entrepreneurs. that the national education policy is the biggest, deepest reform for young Indians since the independence of our country. It empowers youngsters in a manner where you study, you do your coursework, but you also have skills when you leave school. You can make a career not just out of higher education. If you don't want to do higher education, you can go into skilling. You don't want to do skilling, you can do sports. So it's a powerful transformation and empowerment of youngsters. Now on the other broad area of skilling, our model is very simple. We work with industry in partnership, small company, big company, large company, mega company. They tell us what the skills are that they require in their pipeline, and the government partners with what we call sector skill councils to create a framework of skill courses that is delivered through a network of almost 20,000 institutions, including colleges that want to deliver skills.
And IITs and IIMs and
ITIs, IITs, private centers, NGOs, and ITIs and IITs and colleges and universities. However, in the last 3 years, the Prime Minister has, in a sense, changed the direction a little bit and also brought an equivalent focus on self-employment and micro-entrepreneurship. So there is future-ready skills for jobs, but also allowing more and more, especially in rural areas, those who are in agriculture, traditional family skills, to also become fully empowered micro businesses with large markets. Now I'll give you an example.
Yes.
Which will explain to you what we are doing, the thought behind this. In Jammu and Kashmir yesterday, for a group of people, I flagged off a shipment of exports to the UK. Something called Namda carpets. Okay. Now you will not know it. Most people here will not know Namda carpets. Even I did not know about it 2 years ago. It is a dying traditional craft in Jammu and Kashmir. And it is almost dead. But the market for those products are almost 2,000-3,000 crores per annum.
Wow.
And because the craft died because of terrorism and all that in Jammu and Kashmir, their whole business has moved to Nepal. And वहाँ से export हो रहा है 1,000 crore का export साल में. So in one of my visits to Jammu and Kashmir, I met this young smart entrepreneur. He said, if you, sir, partner with me on skilling only in this area, I can revive this industry. I'm giving an example of what we do. 2,500 local youngsters were trained for 4 months to become artisans. They have all now got either jobs working for that entrepreneur or doing it at home in groups.
Yes.
And that person is now exporting it to UK.
Wow.
And he believes the potential for Namda exports is going to be not less than 1,000 crores in the next 12 months.
So these are incredible examples to see.
These are the models that we are adopting in terms of empowering people to create their own businesses, business models, using either traditional craft or some new craft and connecting them to global markets.
Incredible to see. I think there is a phrase, when there is a will, there is a way. With the government, there is a policy that has brought the change and it's working. So a big round of applause for Chandrasekhar ji. आप सब लोग enjoy तो कर रहे हैं ना? Hopefully we all are learning, including me. So I think a little bit of a tricky question that came up to my mind was, I think the government policies and framework, we just recently saw the GST of 28% on the gaming industry. Okay. So I think my request to you is how you are building, being a bridge between the gaming industry entrepreneurs and the government, because it quietly not as a competitive working with the rest of the world.
It's not a controversial question, but it's certainly a tricky issue, because online gaming includes gambling and betting.
Yes.
And that, as you know, there is a certain social pushback, and we don't believe as a government, and certainly I think it is a consensus opinion of most citizens of this country, that we want online gambling in India. So therefore, if you say, okay, no online gambling, so what becomes to, what happens to the rest of online gaming? So we have over the last 4 months created a framework. There are new rules that have been notified under the IT Act that says that as long as you are not doing wagering, that is gambling,
Yeah.
as long as the game does not cause any harm or toxicity, i.e. the content of the game is not anti-religion, anti-women, anti-children, etc., etc. And as long as the game is not addictive, that means it is not a game that sort of has, by design, algorithms that make you play it again and again and again, an addictive gaming, you can have online gaming. Now, this is a regulation and a framework that is just beginning to take shape. What the GST Council has done is essentially pronounce on their efforts of the last 2.5 years. So we have only just as a government and as a ministry and as a department moved into online gaming and tried to resolve this and create a framework in the last 4 months. So the GST thing, I know a lot of people are very upset and they say, 28%, it is punitive, it is on the total amount and there's some definition on what amount it should be charged, etc., etc. I have told them to be thoda calm. We are in early days.
Yeah.
We will certainly, after the framework is settled and it is stable, we will request the GST Council to send a proposal to them for their consideration. This is not Government of India doing this, this is GST Council. And as you know, the GST Council is all the state governments. And this particular group was headed by the CM of Meghalaya, Conrad Sangma. So it has to be something that they will have to be sent after we have a clearer framework or a much more settled framework for them, for their consideration.
So thank you for the guidance on this particular part. Now I understand the background where it's coming from. We don't want the Indians to be addicted to the gaming and the casinos and then not have the money for the family welfare. So I'm sure the right decision would be made. एक फनी क्वेश्चन है, मैं हिंदी में पूछ रहा हूँ. हमारी सबके जो कैलेंडर्स होते हैं ना, वो फॉरवर्ड में जाते हैं. हम कल का दिन देखते हैं, परसों का देखते हैं. हमारी घड़ी भी होती है, वो फॉरवर्ड में चलती है. वी लुक फॉर द फ्यूचर. पर सर के ऑफिस में जब जाओ ना, सर के ऑफिस में रिवर्स टाइमिंग सिस्टम है. रिवर्स टाइमिंग टू द इलेक्शन डे, नेक्स्ट पार्लियामेंट इलेक्शन. ऐसा क्यों है सर?
नहीं, एक्चुअली है क्या, मेरे ऑफिस में एक काउंटर है दैट काउंट्स डाउन फ्रॉम जनवरी 31st, 2024. और ये इसीलिए मैंने किया क्योंकि व्हेन आई बिकेम अ मिनिस्टर, आई फेल्ट दैट द पेस एट विच प्राइम मिनिस्टर वांटेड अस टू वर्क एंड द पेस एट विच समटाइम्स द ब्यूरोक्रेसी वर्क्स वर डिफरेंट. तो मैंने एक दिन सोचा, ये हाउ डू आई कन्विंस माई टीममेट्स एंड माई कॉलीग्स इन द मिनिस्ट्री that I am a man in a hurry and the government is, I'm working for a prime minister who's a man in a hurry. तो मैंने सोचा एक clock लगा दूँ वहाँ पे which reverse counts, and then I can tell my officers that look, you are here permanently, but my job runs out on the 31st of January 2024. So that way it is easier for me to explain why I am so in a hurry and I want things done fast. And it's a much more gentle and cordial way to explain and getting alignment rather than saying that I want this done and they're saying no, we cannot do it.
So talking again about the startup ecosystems and entrepreneurship, what do you foresee in terms of the policies, initiatives in fostering the promotion of the startups, corporate startup partnership, government startup partnerships, and then using our
No, when I heard what JIF is doing, and one of the reasons that I certainly was interested in coming and meeting with all of you is, this is certainly a very important model for sustainably growing our startup ecosystem. Like I said, the Prime Minister wants this to go from 1 lakh to 10, 15 lakh startups. The government will not be able to provide the capital, and we should not also depend only on foreign sources of capital. That will come certainly. This will also be available. But community and corporate partnerships for startups is a very important element of how we see India Techade being achieved, how we see the $1 trillion economy being achieved, how we see more and more startups being achieved. And I will give you my personal experience in this, and that is why I want to congratulate JIF for doing this and Jito for doing this. One of the great things of being a minister is that one of the good experiences that I've had is that over the last 2 years, I have visited about 56, 60 colleges all around the country. And not IITs and IIScs, these are regular colleges and engineering, non-engineering colleges, and we interacted with students all over. So during one period when I was in Gujarat, and I was doing this in many Gujarat colleges, I would interact with students and students would say, and you know, students are, youngsters are forthright. They would say, no, this is fine, I want to start up, I want to create a startup, but लेकिन मुझे पैसा नहीं मिल रहा है. तो एक कॉलेज में गया, उधर सुनने को मिला, तो मैंने कुछ बोला, ठीक है, हम हेल्प करेंगे, इंट्रोड्यूस करेंगे. दूसरे कॉलेज में गया, तीसरे कॉलेज में गया, ऐसा I saw a pattern where there was a little frustration building up amongst youth that we are not getting money. We have ideas, we have motivation, we want to succeed, but we need the capital. So in a business community meeting outside of this college, I had finished this college thing and went into it was not CIA, but it was some other local industry chamber. I said, आप सब इतने मेहनती लोग हैं, you are so prosperous, you are doing so well. And I think I said this in Surat, if I remember right. Why can't you all come together and create a small fund? I said it and I left. Then 1 week later, I came back to Gujarat for my next round of college visits. And when I reached there, one of the first programs that they had set up for me was 7 businessmen who wanted to meet me and say, we have responded to your call and they have collected 1,000 crores to commit to.
Wow.
And so the money is not important, the amount is not important, but the fact that a local group of business, local community would say, for our youngsters, we have to do more than just encourage them, we have to do more than just handhold them, mentor them, but we can also collect capital and help them in realizing their dreams is a very, very powerful partnership. So therefore I congratulate you, Jito and JIF, for doing this model. This is truly an important part of our Indian way of creating a sustainable, competitive, globally competitive ecosystem of startups. So I think this is the way, and this is, to answer your question, extremely important part of our overall strategy.
Great, thank you. So I think I'm going to ask you 2-3 questions. I'm also looking at the clock. I know we have a busy schedule. So again, going back to your days with the Intel, Intel used to be the company. हमारे मिनिस्टर साहब इंटेल को छोड़ के आ गए तो अभी इंटेल इतनी अच्छी नहीं चल रही है. True. So he was the chief designer. So your days with the Intel and also your $1 billion exit with the BPL, 3 learnings that we all can learn from as a startup ecosystem.
I tend not to give any advice on this, but because every startup will go through their own learning, but I certainly give 2-3 basic values that I think we should take into building any business, even whether you're a startup or a business. First of all, integrity, and is extremely important. People will tell you all kinds of shortcuts to get you the next rupee of valuation or whatever. Don't do it. It will just come back and bite you in the long term. So just stay focused on doing it the right way. Second is determination. I mean, I think starting up and building a business in today's India, where it is much more competitive than when we started, you have to have the stamina and the determination to see it through. At the first sight of a problem, you don't get up and run. Determination. And third, I always say deep knowledge. There is no longer an opportunity available for a startup where either the founder or the management team is not great at something in that space. You have to be extremely good in that space because general skills, general knowledge, general business is not today, is not going to cut it. So I always say integrity, determination, and deep knowledge about the area that you're getting into. And deep knowledge, by the way, can be acquired by reading, by talking to mentors, by talking to other people, learning, reading. So I think these three things are certainly almost non-negotiable attributes for whether you want to be successful or not. Now there are going to be 5 other things that are also required, but that you will discover on your own in your own journey.
Wow. Amazing. I mean, many of us have come back from the US and we relate to a lot of the things you are saying. It's never easy decision to leave the US and that to a job like Intel, working in the Silicon Valley and come back. So what you achieved is really, we call it dream, dare and deliver, which is what you have done. Nowadays, one of the hottest topics is the artificial intelligence. I know the US Senate is working on now the framework and the policy. It has come too fast for the artificial intelligence. In India, those of us who are going to start a company in AI space, would there be a policy? What should we be looking for?
Yeah.
This is another question from the audience for the artificial intelligence.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think artificial intelligence, the Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister has already said it, that it is, we see it as a kinetic enabler of the digital economy.
Yeah.
And it can add about $150 billion more to the digital economy in the short term. That is how we see it. We see it as an opportunity. Yes, there are some challenges in terms of deployment of AI. Can AI cause harm? Can AI be misused? All of those challenges are there. Our approach towards regulating AI will be visible in what we now refer to as a Digital India Act.
Okay.
It is a new legislation which will succeed the IT Act, which is a 22-year-old law, which currently regulates the tech ecosystem. And in the Digital India Act, the basic principles for all emerging technologies, including but not limited to AI, will be that we will regulate user harm. We will say that regardless of what the platform can do, we will specify what it should not do.
Okay.
It cannot cause harm, it cannot create misinformation, it cannot create crimes. And so therefore, we will regulate this through the prism of user harm. The guardrails will be created. And within those guardrails, an innovator can do exactly what he or she wants to do and create whatever innovation out of AI, number one. But more than just the law, we are creating an overall framework of enabling AI. And AI, as anybody here knows who's going to do AI, requires data sets and it requires AI compute, the actual GPUs to compute it. So the government and private, in partnership with the private sector, is going to build the AI compute capacity. So if you are an AI startup and you have a foundational model or a large language model that needs to be trained and learned, you will have access to AI compute capacity. You don't have to go to the US to do it. That is the infra part.
Absolutely.
The second enabling thing is the data sets. India currently is the largest consumer and producer of data. We are organizing that data as anonymized data via a platform called the India Datasets Program, India Datasets Platform. That will be then available for all Indian startups and researchers to use their learning models and training models on those data.
Wow, incredible.
And I want to be clear
Yes.
that no foreign company will have access to those Indian data sets.
Perfect. I think I'm going to ask you an interesting question. So I think most of our audience, they're smart, they also love the food. They're foodies. I see you often on Twitter with the foods that you eat. आप ट्विटर देखते हो तो देखना सर को फूड का हमेशा रहता है. तो क्या फेवरेट फूड क्या है आपका?
I'm not a foodie at all. I just want to clarify. I tend to take a photograph whenever somebody goes out of the way, gives me some food, out of the largest of the heart. One of the things that I do as a minister and as a politician, we go to Karyakarta's homes.
Yeah.
And there will be, people who with a lot of love and affection will serve you some local food. So I like to showcase not the food, but the sentiment of love and the affection behind giving the food. So I am not a foodie, even though my size, people will say, no, no, you are a foodie. I have bad food habits. I eat late and all of that. And I also tend to put photographs of my ministry cafeteria food. Because again, they send me food in the afternoon when I'm working late, and dal, chawal, and so on and so forth. So I take photographs of that as well. And the third thing is on Indigo flights, they have a tradition now whenever I fly, they give me a small note and they give me a complimentary box of cashew nuts or badam and one drink. तो उसका भी मैं फोटो लगाता हूँ. तो ये 3 categories हैं photographs के.
अरे वाह क्या बात है. So, sir, no, it's been really, we have enjoyed the interactive session with you. You know, you can see the full house here, some 400 people from different parts of life across India and few people from around the world. And this dialogue has been amazing learning for us. For me personally, we have our chairman here, Shri Sukrajinar, who blessed us with this event. Hamare Rakesh Ji Mehta, who is our advisory council. He is the father of that young person who is sitting here, Rajat. Yes. And Hamare President Abhayji Srishimal and rest of the team, we really owe it to you. And we are planning a global forum in Reliance Jio. And we plan to invite Intels and AMDs of the world. Good. And we hope to bring you also for that event. But Rajivji Srinivasan, the man who leads the technology of India every day in every part of the life, because it counts the number of days. Let's give a big round of standing applause and round of applause.
Thank you.
I think big one.